so full of layers. It is a multi-layered film. It is an onion. Spielberg made an onion. The 1981 Onion, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Magnificent. Hi, I'm Kit. This is me. I used to be thin, now I'm a whale, but that's not important right now. One day I woke up and we were all living in a zombie apocalypse. Not cool! So everyone stayed home and watched YouTube. Hooray! I watched for a while and liked what some people were doing so much that I decided to have a go too. I've always been a big film buff, and back when I was skinny and had hair, I used to make films with my friends. Some even had royal premieres. So although I don't make films anymore, I still like to talk about them, and that's what this channel is all about, at least for now. So, good people of the apocalypse, I'm Kit, and this is my world. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to change things up a little bit. I've got a new camera, hello new camera. Hopefully things are looking a little bit clearer and nicer from that area of the room. And in honour of the new camera and the fact that I figured out how to get my volume levels a little bit better, I thought I would do a Top 10 Tuesday. Yes, that's right folks, you heard it here first. Top 10 Tuesday. I'll say it again. Top 10 Tuesday. I've decided that instead of doing a lengthy rant about a film that you may not be interested in me discussing, I would discuss lots of films all in one slightly less lengthy rant. So it's an experiment, but these things do seem to be quite popular in tube land, so I thought I'd give it a try. And because it's still going to be on the subject of film, obviously film being the thing that I like discussing most of all, I thought I would do a top 10 film list. And I had a look online, and the number one result that came up is from the Independant, and it's dated Monday the 2nd of April 2018 at 1:05 PM. It's very specific, this internet thing, isn't it? It's a top 10, well, it's actually all 32 Steven Spielberg films ranked from worst to best by Graham Flannagan and Jason Guerrasio, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Graham Flannagan and Jason Guerrasio, and they've compiled a list of all his 32 films to date in order from worst to best. I'm going to skip straight to the top 10 based on the Independent list. In at number 10, Empire of the Sun, 1987. Now this is the film that introduced us to the young boy who later became Christian Bale. At the time he was just a Welsh kid with a wig. Actually, it was a quite good wig, and he gave quite a good performance. It was easy to see in Empire of the Sun that Christian Bale was destined for Hollywood greatness. He was an extremely talented young man. He was very earnest, very serious, even back then. I think he was probably 13 or so, I'm guessing. It's a World War II epic. It's set in a POW camp, that's a prisoner of war, for anyone who doesn't know that acronym. And it's one of Spielberg's explorations of the war, of which there are several. By the war, of course, I'm referring to World War II. It's a very intense film. It's very well made. It has a classic John Williams score. So, Empire of the Sun, number 10. I think number 10 is a fair place for the list. Number 9. This one surprises me. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1984. Now this is generally agreed to be the second worst of the Indiana Jones films after Crystal Skull, which I don't even acknowledge as an Indiana Jones film. Crystal Skull is poo. I noticed that it is on the list, but quite rightly it's right at the bottom of the list. We may revisit it later, although Crystal Skull is not a film that anyone would ever want to revisit. But anyway, Temple of Doom is definitely the second best, and I'm surprised to see it in at number 9, especially since Last Crusade, which is my favourite of the Indiana Jones films, and Spielberg's favourite of the Indiana Jones films, and most people's favourite of the Indiana Jones films. It's number 11. 11. I think that's a strange place on the list. Let's see if they can justify it. Well, they describe it as the last good Indiana Jones film. They're not wrong about that. And they say it's really good. Why is it number 11 then? Harrison Ford and Sean Connery have incredible chemistry? No shit. It could have been the perfect ending to a perfect trilogy if only George Lucas hadn't come up with an idea for a sequel. We know how that turned out. So hang about. Last Crusade gets bumped down the list because the film that came after it was crap. That's not fair. I take exception to that. Anyway, so Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, number 9. At number 8, Jurassic Park. Now, I would have expected Jurassic Park to be much higher up the list. Jurassic Park changed movies. It ushered in a new era of computer-generated imagery, for better or for worse, but in the case of Jurassic Park, it was definitely for better. Although, a small caveat to that is that most people who remember very fondly the CGI in Jurassic Park are actually remembering Stan Winston's exceptional animatronic dinosaurs. They were live action, they were on set, they were full scale, but they were puppets, they were not computer generated imagery. And they were actually the majority of the dinosaurs that you saw in the film. The CG dinosaurs were used very briefly and mostly at long distance or at night. The T-Rex attack being the obvious prime example where it worked extremely well. It was very difficult, and it remains very difficult, to distinguish between the computer-generated T-Rex and the animatronic T-Rex, and that's because it was shot at night, in the dark, in the wet and rain. And you can hide a lot of crimes in darkness and rain effects. So that was one of the main reasons that Jurassic Park was so impressive. But let's not forget, or actually let's try very hard to forget, and we mostly succeed in doing that, but let's not forget the brontosaurs. I think they were brontosaurs. The first one that you see, it's a beautiful moment, it's moving, it's perfectly acted by Sam Neill and Laura Dern. The moment that they see their first dinosaur, and there he is in all his low-res magnificence. Look at that film now, and it's actually quite shocking how unrealistic it looks. It's low-res, it's not colour matched with the rest of the scene, it's blurry, the motion is a little bit stilted. It's actually not very good. However, at the time, in 1993, it was the best dinosaur anyone had ever seen up until that point in that particular movie. Obviously, later on in the movie, they would see even better ones. But as an introduction to CG dinosaurs, it was staggering. I watched it. I remember as a young man sitting in the cinema watching that film with my mouth open and my eyes wide going, I genuinely do not know how that was done. I was unaware of CGI. I thought I knew everything there was to know about how movies were made. I was a fan of people like Phil Tippett from ILM. Phil Tippett, who, by the way, when he worked on Jurassic Park, said in jest to Spielberg or someone on the crew, he said, I guess I'm extinct now. And that line was so apt that it actually worked its way into the movie and was spoken, I believe, by the character played by Sam Neill. But it was expressed originally by Phil Tippett, a man who specialised in exactly the sort of animation and dinosaurs that I was very familiar with, that had been perfected by Ray Harryhausen and, of course, pioneered by Willis O'Brien on King Kong in the 1930s. Suddenly, all of the tried and true techniques for making movie monsters had to be rethought. It was a new era, and it began on Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was the film that revolutionised movies, and it should always be appreciated and respected for that, even though the CG in Jurassic Park is now a little bit dated and clunky. And personally, my favourite of the Jurassic Park films, and this is controversial, but my favourite is Jurassic Park 3, mainly because it's animals uncaged in a more natural environment, and it involves pterodactyls, and I really like pterodactyls. So anyway, Jurassic Park number 8. I think it should be slightly higher up the list, but anyway. Saving Private Ryan, number 7. This is one of the rare Spielberg films that I've only seen about 4 times. Most of them I've seen in double figures. More because I absolutely adore Tom Hanks, and I love Tom Hanks in everything that he's in. More because of Hanks than the film itself, I have to say. The opening scenes are legendary, and they are the reason to watch it. The rest of the film is a standard kind of movie story. There's so little to write home about in the actual story of Saving Private Ryan that I can't really remember the details of it enough to even give you a summary now. But what I can discuss, although I won't, but what I can discuss is the opening sequence, which is it's hard to watch. It's fatiguing. There's a syndrome called battle fatigue that exists in moviegoers that filmmakers are very aware of. Peter Jackson discussed it when he was making the Two Towers, because they were editing the Helm's Deep sequence, and of course he had hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage of Helm's Deep, and he was very conscious of not wanting the audience to suffer battle fatigue. I suffered battle fatigue during Saving Private Ryan. You can have too much of a good thing. There was just a little bit too much of a good thing. It was very well done. It was magnificent filmmaking. Personally, I'm just not big on bangs. I don't like the bangs. Explosions and gunfire do not thrill me. So that's Saving Private Ryan, 1998, at number 7 on this list. At number 6, Duel. Now this is an interesting one. This, I believe, was Spielberg's first film. Yes, it was. It was a TV movie made for ABC in 1971. This is the film that put Spielberg on the map. People noticed him. It was a very, very simple story, and Spielberg showed through his filmmaking technique that even a simple story about a man being chased in his car by a large truck, the driver of which you never see, and by the way that is the entire story, can be made into a thrilling and exciting and interesting and non-boring film. Purely by excellent filmmaking, Spielberg pulled this off. Duel, very interesting film. Yes, I was just distracted by reading the review on the Independent. They basically say, right out of the gate, Spielberg established himself as a master of action and suspense. I would like to add to that, he established himself as a master filmmaker. He knew how to tell a story. Spielberg, master storyteller, master filmmaker. Man of mystery. So yes, Duel, 1971. The film that started it all. In at number 5, Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981. Now, this is a film that could be higher on the list, in my opinion, although I understand why it isn't. It's a magnificent piece of filmmaking. It's a magnificent piece of storytelling. It's thrilling, it's exciting, it's adventurous, it's romantic, it's a little bit sad, it's got action, adventure, it's got history, archaeology. It's so full of layers. It is a multi-layered film. It is an onion. Spielberg made an onion. The 1981 Onion, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Magnificent. I have discussed this in another video, which I will link in the description. But what I will say about Raiders of the Lost Ark is it's a milestone in movies. It's a movie milestone. Another film that Spielberg made that redefined a genre. This was George Lucas and Steven Spielberg sitting on a Hawaiian beach, sipping margaritas, hiding from the fans and media attention of Lucas's recently released Star Wars film, and coming up with ideas for the next film that they were going to make. Spielberg wanted to make a spy movie. Lucas had a better idea. He wanted to reinvent the Saturday afternoon serial, and the rest is history. Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, in at number 5. At number 4, another of Spielberg's films that I feel could be a little bit higher up the list, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, made in 1982. This is one of the most perfect and beautiful films ever made. Full stop. Now, it should have got the Oscar for Best Film, but it didn't. It lost to Gandhi, directed by Richard Attenborough. Attenborough, who later became very good friends with Spielberg. And Attenborough always said very publicly that he felt that Spielberg should have got the Oscar for Best Film for E.T. Attenborough considered E.T. a superior film to Gandhi, and so do I. Gandhi won, I think, because it was more grown up and more Oscar bait. E.T. is a better film. It's, again, a fantastic story. It's beautifully written. I will put the name of the writer up. I can't remember it. Is it Kathleen Kennedy? Oh, I'm terrible with names. It happens as you get older. Beautifully written. She wrote it from her own observations of her own children and other children that she knew. So the dialogue and interactions of the children in E.T. are very, very real. You can buy into aliens, you can believe in aliens if the children that interact with the aliens are believable children. And these are believable children. They're so real. Beautiful performances from a young cast, pretty much all of whom went on to greater things. Henry Thomas, of course, a magnificent young actor, carried the entire film effortlessly. If you get the opportunity to see his audition footage, it will blow your mind. It will literally... They sat the kid down in front of a video camera and said to him, "Right, kid, your best friend, this little alien, he's a squidgy guy, you love him, he's been taken away from you by these grown-ups. Improvise some dialogue. Go." And the kid just burst into tears, real tears. And it's heartbreaking. And on the spot, it's heartbreaking. And on the spot, he was given the job. "Kid, you're hired." I think those were the words used. Anyway, if you get the opportunity to see the special edition DVD of E.T., watch it for the special features, not for Spielberg having changed stuff. Get the special edition because it's worth it for the special features, so that you can see, amongst many, many other things, so you can see the kid giving the audition. Henry Thomas, magnificent young actor. I will link to the DVD in the description. And of course, Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore is one of those people who has had such a long and distinguished career that she's been able to go through incredible turmoil in her personal life and in her professional life and still survive it, come out the other side, reinvent herself and become a star all over again whilst still being young. It's quite an achievement, and of course it's because she started so young. She was tiny, she was teeny tiny little Drew Barrymore. Hello, Drew Barrymore. Hello. I'll put you down there. Anyway, I digress. And of course, C. Thomas Hell. C. Thomas Hell was in it. Who knew? He was one of the kids. He was one of the BMX kids in E.T. So yes, fabulous cast, fabulous kids. It is marvellous. Marvellous film. Now then, let's get back to the list. So that was E.T. in at number 4 from 1982. Now this is going to be controversial. Number 3, Schindler's List, 1993. Now this is high up on most people's film lists. If you're a film buff and you say that you don't like Citizen Kane, people will spit at you because Citizen Kane is one of those classic films, like Grapes of Wrath and various other films. It's one of those films that as a film student you're expected to love and admire, and there's a lot to love and admire about it. However, it's not a film that I ever think, do you know what, I think I might watch Citizen Kane. I really fancy Citizen Kane. I can't remember the last time I saw Citizen Kane. I am so in the mood for Citizen Kane. It just never happens. And I have to say, the same thing is true of Schindler's List. I watched it once. It's one of the very, very rare Spielberg films that I've not watched more than once. It was okay. I watched it. I thought, yep, great filmmaker makes great film using great filmmaking. But it's depressing, and I watch films to be uplifted. Apart from very occasionally a film that can be depressing and have a message, and somehow there's something so marvellous about it, and it gives me so many other things. I need a hook. I need hooks to that was another Spielberg film, didn't make it into the top 10, unsurprisingly. I actually don't mind Hook, although there is an awful lot wrong with it. There's more wrong with it than there is right with it. But anyway, I digress. And I've lost my thread. Where was I? Schindler's List. It's gone. Crickets and tumbleweeds. Crickets and tumbleweeds. What do tumbleweeds sound like? There was a band called the Tumbleweeds.
7 hours later.
So anyway, so yes, I would swap Schindler's List with Amistad and The Colour Purple, and there you see you can still have films that are politically correct and have an important message and want to put a spotlight on the injustice. So that was Schindler's List, 1993, at number 3. At number 2, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. La 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 la. This was the film that put Spielberg and Dreyfuss on the map as a double act. This was Spielberg being Martin Scorsese and Dreyfuss being De Niro. Except Dreyfuss wasn't De Niro and Spielberg wasn't Scorsese. They were both better, in my opinion. Controversial. Yes, I prefer Spielberg films to Scorsese films, and I prefer Richard Dreyfuss as an actor to Robert De Niro. It's a personal thing. It's a chemical thing. It's the way I am. Get over it. Get over it. So, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's a funny story about the aliens in Close Encounters. If you get the special edition DVD, which I recommend, Spielberg discusses the various different techniques that they used to try and create the image of the aliens emerging from the spacecraft. And he tells a very funny story about how one thing that they tried was putting an orangutan on roller skates. They actually thought this would work. That's the funniest thing about the story, is the fact that anyone actually thought this would work. But they dressed an orangutan up as an alien and put it on roller skates and shoved it out of the spaceship. And apparently this orangutan emerged backwards, skating backwards, windmilling its arms. And it's a funny image. It's one of, when I first watched Spielberg relate that story, I hurt myself. I was laughing so much. Just the idea of an orangutan skating backwards out of a spaceship, windmilling its arms. It's hilarious. Anyway, Close Encounters is a good film to have in the number 2 spot. There are plenty of others that could also be in the number 2 spot, but I'm fine with this. And it's also notable for having a magnificent John Williams score, and not just the 5-note spaceship motif, but the rest of the score as well is magnificent. It's one of his more underrated scores, because it gets overshadowed just by the 5 notes, in the same way that the John Williams score for Jaws gets overshadowed by the 2-note ostinato, which actually is more than 2 notes. People just think of it as doo-doo, 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 do 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 do. But there's a third note. It goes do 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 do, and then it goes do 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 do. And that's not the only bit of music in the film. It's the bit that people remember, mostly incorrectly. But there is a whole orchestral score in Jaws. And it's a magnificent score. It's one of John Williams' best scores. Now, this is a film score that has actually gained the respect and notoriety that it deserves. Even though most people don't credit enough of the score, they only credit the two-note ostinato. But Spielberg has very publicly said on numerous occasions that the music for Jaws is most of the reason that it's such a successful film, at least 50% of the reason, probably more. And that's absolutely correct. And the reason that I'm talking about Jaws at such length is because Jaws is number one on this list. Jaws, made in 1975, based on a mediocre novel by Peter Benchley. I know it was a bestseller, loads of people loved it. I read it, I wasn't impressed. But the novel inspired a movie that will remain one of the greats, and it's a testament to Spielberg's filmmaking prowess that this film is so good, because everything about it shouldn't have worked. The shark isn't very good. It's not as terrible as people remember. In fact, for the majority of the shots where you can actually see the shark, it looks really good. It looks fine. It's fabulous. And I do mean Bruce, the artificial shark, because of course Ron and Valerie Taylor shot live shark footage in Australia, which was integrated into the film as well. But Bruce, the much derided great white turd, as Spielberg called it, was actually pretty good. And for most of its close-ups, it was fine. And that's because it doesn't get very many close-ups. It's used so sparingly, because it famously didn't work most of the time, that Spielberg was forced to use other techniques to show the audience when the shark was there. The yellow barrels. Those yellow barrels added so much to the film, and they were there to show you that the sharks arrived, because the real shark was broken. Excellent filmmaking. Almost accidentally, Spielberg elevated his own movie into the stratosphere by the simple expedient of overcoming a technical difficulty on set. But he did it in such an imaginative way, in such a resourceful way, that it made the film infinitely better. You don't see the shark until about halfway through, and even then it's only briefly, and then you don't see it again until the end. When you do see it, it's not as impressive as it could be. And I'm really only talking about there's one shot that lets it down. That shark would not be derided at all if it hadn't have jumped out of the water and landed on the back of the boat. And in that one wide shot of the shark up on the back of the boat, wiggling round like a great white turd, that's the shot that ruined it. That's the jumping the shark moment. That's the bit that ruined the shark. If it hadn't have been for that, there wouldn't be a problem. Because the rest of it's fine. Even when the shark's up on the boat and his mouth is going like that. It's fine. From the front, in close-up, biting down on Robert Shaw, the shark looks fine. Yeah, you can see it's an animatronic, but there are worse. There have been worse animatronics than Bruce the Shark. Jaws, 1975, Spielberg's best film, arguably, because there are a few that could take the crown, I have to say. I would be happy with several of his films being at the top of this list, but I'm not going to argue with Jaws, because it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of overcoming the odds to make a terrific film, even when it should have been terrible for lots of different reasons. So anyway, that was my take on the Independent list of Steven Spielberg's best and worst movies. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. And of course, I would love to hear from you if you have any comments as well. So until next time, this was a Top 10 Tuesday. See you again soon.